And, the people like Rob Hershoff and everybody that complains about the deal, let me see their deal. Put the deal on the table that's better. Business is business. You can't just come and say, this deal is rubbish. Show us a deal that's not rubbish. Most of the things that's in the public arena, it's not really the truth. Where people are saying they're selling the Springboks. That's not entirely true. I then met with SARU. I said, stop this thing. SARU would be out of their mind if there's a better deal on the table. The Eckley brothers have shown a commitment in our country and say we are willing to invest money. No, you don't just say to people, we don't want your deal, without saying there's something else. What will happen if they withdraw and there's no deal on the table? So I challenge all the billionaires, all the people that love rugby, come show us how rubbish this deal is of the Eckley brothers. And let's not just call people corrupt.
Can you tell us what is happening with the rugby equity deal?
Well, I think, first in sport, my portfolio, before I come to the rugby equity deal, is that what I'm trying to achieve as the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture is to bring South Africa back to where we were in 2010. We must be a player on the world stage. We must have the UFC. We must have the Olympics. We must have all the events. We must also be part of the world calendar. There's currently a calendar that's going around the world, whether it's F1, whether it's Olympics, whatever it is. South Africa needs to be in contention. If we are the global South, we need to be in contention. And that's first what I'm trying to do. As far as the equity deal is concerned, there's a lot of emotion going around. People are unhappy. There's a lot of speculation. Most of the things that's in the public arena, it's not really the truth. For instance, where people are saying they're selling the Springboks. That's not entirely true. But there's some things that I myself would like to see change in that deal after reading through it. And the provincial union bosses called me and they told me, help us, Minister. I said, fine. I then met with SARU. I said, stop this thing. It's not an instruction, it's an ask. Because I can't really interfere in rugby and football. Because the world governing bodies don't allow government interference. So I can only try to persuade. So I persuaded them. The president of SARU, Mark Alexander, and CEO Rian Oberholzer then agreed. They will postpone the vote. Next week, I'm meeting with all the bosses of the different unions. But I want to say two things. Number one, we must not act like people are falling over their feet to invest in rugby. Rugby is not buying gold bars. So when we have foreign direct investment, when we differ with them, we should do it respectfully and not calling them criminals, people that want to put money in. And, the people like Rob Hershoff and everybody that complains about the deal, let me see their deal. Put the deal on the table that's better. Business is business. You can't just come and say, this deal is rubbish. Show us a deal that's not rubbish. And that's just a fact. If you go to an auction house and then you take, for instance, you take this iPad and there's only one, and they auction this, and only one person says, I paid 10 rands for the thing. You can't say the auctioneer is corrupt. You need to have other bids. So that's what I'm going to strive to achieve. And say, give us put something better on the table. Rugby needs the money. Rugby is basically bankrupt. Not only SARU, but all federations around the world. So I'm just wanting to be the voice that says to people, let's sit down, let's hear each other. Today is 1 year exactly since we won the Rugby World Cup. 1 year exactly. We're still in the honeymoon phase of that. Let's not muddy the waters with accusations and counter-accusations. Let's come together and let's say, there's a better deal. SARU would be out of their mind if there's a better deal on the table. The Eckley brothers have shown a commitment in our country and say we are willing to invest money. No, you don't just say to people, we don't want your deal, without saying there's something else. What will happen if they withdraw and there's no deal on the table? So I challenge all the billionaires, all the people that love rugby, come show us how rubbish this deal is of the Eckley brothers. And let's not just call people corrupt, the names and no, you can't get so much commission. Commission is irrelevant. You can get 1% commission, you can get 20% commission. I've done deals where I got 25% commission. I've got deals where I got 0.5% commission. It all depends on the deal and the structuring and your negotiating skills. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. So next week I'll come back on your show to give you a report on how my meeting went with her. But I want to thank SARU for listening to me when I asked them, because I didn't demand. I asked for the meeting, the vote to be postponed. And they adhered to my ask, and I want to thank them for that.
Yeah, guys, so you've heard it from Minister McKenzie. The whole thing with the SA Rugby deal is actually really emotional to many South Africans. And, for me, I've just begun, my love for rugby recently, especially learning a lot from Minister Gayton McKenzie, and trying to get used to rugby because for most of us in West Africa, rugby really isn't that much of a thing. Although I learned recently that, the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, was a really passionate lover of rugby, and he used to play rugby, growing up. So in East Africa, probably rugby was popular, but in West Africa, rugby really still isn't a thing. And so we have a lot to learn from South Africa in terms of rugby and the way the whole game functions and the businesses around it. And so with this whole foreign direct investment, which Minister McKenzie speaks to, that actually seeks to sort of like represent an investment in rugby, which Minister McKenzie actually claims that, SA Rugby is bankrupt in a way, and it sort of like needs some kind of injection of funds to prop it up. I think it's really emotional that it's taking a toll on many South Africans that, it appears that the SA Rugby, SA Rugby team would be sold off to some other managers, and so it really spells a kind of like a really negative picture, sort of like a loss in a way, indirectly, though, although that investment will still be functioning in South Africa, but it will be owned and managed by sort of like outsiders. And so that emotional kind of like feeling is actually palpable, and Gayton McKenzie actually echoes that in his speech here, interview on Beast News. But I just thought to really have a quick recap on what the whole equity deal with the Springboks rugby team actually all about. So it's about this whole Oakley Sports Group. I found a report here on Rugby Mag. It actually speaks about the fact that, the 1.3 billion rand equity deal between SA Rugby and the Seattle-based Oakley Sports Group, ASG, right? It actually looks to set to crumble. It actually looks to set to crumble in the face of reported opposition from South Africa's top rugby unions. So we know that SARU and Gayton McKenzie, actually in this video, you could hear he's challenging the billionaires in South Africa. SARU and billionaires and, the many elite businessmen in South Africa actually, resisting the deal by the Seattle-based Oakley Group to sort of like invest heavily in South Africa's rugby Springboks team and actually have a larger percentage of control, I suspect, on the board, you see. So the report here says that according to a report by News 24, the deal which would have been SARU, the deal which would have been that SARU would sell a 20% stake in its commercial arm to ASG is unlikely to proceed when the SARU Council meets, to vote. And I hear that this vote now has been postponed. I think Minister McKenzie spoke to the SARU, union to postpone this deal, and it will be taking place now somewhere in December, when they will be voting if the Seattle-based Oakley Group would be able to now own 20% stake in this SA Rugby, board of trusteeship and all that whole investment going forward. The report says that 7 of SARU's 14 member unions had signed a letter opposing the deal, according to News 24, but then that the unions are also pushing for a postponement of the vote, and they're calling for an alternative proposal to be presented in 3 months, all right? Now, for the ASG deal, this Oakley Sports Group deal to go through, 75% of the unions would need to back the plan, all right? However, with the opposition mounting, opposition now from SA Billionaires, the likes of, like you heard from Gayton McKenzie, the likes of Rob Herzog and, other big, SA Billionaires who think that this might be a crush to South Africa's autonomy and hegemony of the SA Rugby team. So this is where, so it says that with the opposition that mounting, the deal appears to be on a verge of collapse. All right. And now we know that it says here that despite SARU conducting a national road show to rally support for the proposal, there are concerns about the transparency of the deal and the long-term impact which the deal will have. And this is the problem. I think this is where a lot of uncertainty actually still dwells within, that, you know, people do not really understand yet what will be the long-term impact of this deal, you know, on SA Rugby. Would we have an SA Rugby that will now be controlled by, you know, American financiers, because they'll be having quite a, you know, 20% stake in the board of trusteeship actually is quite huge. So there will be much more control. What future will this have for SA Rugby? And so these are kind of like the issues that are actually cropping up as regards this deal with Gaten McKenzie's now trying to really address. So it says that the letter from the unions addressed to SA Rugby President Mark Alexander and also the CEO Rian Oberholzer actually raised several key issues. And one of them is the lack of the clarity about the ASG's consortium members and the sources of their funding. So this Oakley, Seattle-based Oakley group that actually wishes to invest in SA Rugby hasn't really brought, you know, a clear membership of, you know, their board and also what their source of, you know, finances are. So it's really unclear to really let go, you know, that 20% of the trusteeship of the SA Rugby, you know, team to this kind of. So these are kind of like the issues that the SARU actually finds, you know, problematic. It says that the union also argued that there is insufficient transparency and they question whether ASG has the financial capacity to execute the transaction fully. So there's a lot of blurry issues around the transaction, and it just feels really, you know, unclear. Rob Hersov actually is of the notion that the whole deal is so unprofessional, and, you know, it would lead to an eventual loss for SA Rugby. It says here that the letter that the union also sent to SA Rugby said that, you know, many of the senior executives of the undersigned members, you know, and their shareholders, that's for this ASG, they have significant experience in public and private capital markets, and the fee proposed is not appropriate by any measure. So this was Rob Hersov's problem as well, that the fee that was proposed, although these guys have experience in the, you know, private capital markets and, you know, the way the market should actually be function in terms of the fee that should be proposed for such a large conglomerate like SA Rugby, but the fee that they proposed was really not appropriate. And, you know, like Gaten McKenzie speaks here, we know that SA Rugby might be bankrupt at the moment. There might be a lot of pressure to take any kind of deal that comes up, but, you know, at the end of the day, one has to really think of the long-term plan. I think this is where SARU is actually trying to be careful, as well as, you know, the likes of billionaires like Rob Hersov and others. But anyway, it says that there's also concern about the long-term implications for SA Rugby's financial independence, with the unions warning that the deal risks permanent changes to SA Rugby's commercial structure, including the Springboks brand. So this is what I was actually saying, that, you know, a 20% stake in SA Rugby actually means a lot, and it might actually, you know, lead to the distortion of the Springboks brand. It might probably affect their performance either positively or negatively. It's not yet so clear, but there are long-term implications of this kind of deal, and, you know, this is actually what the likes of SARU and others. But Gaten McKenzie is of the view that, you know, this is foreign direct investment, and that SA Rugby is actually bankrupt and would need some of that investment. But rather than, you know, dismissing them totally, that foreign direct investment is actually much more advisable to engage them respectfully and actually listen to their plans, listen to their proposals, and see how to work around it with SARU and SA Rugby. So that's where this whole deal is at the moment. We'll keep waiting and watching to see how the vote comes through and what will be the result of that vote. I think somewhere around December, we'll know if probably from 2025, SA Rugby would be co-managed by American-based, Seattle-based Oakley Group that actually wishes to invest in SA Rugby. But anyway, what do you guys think about Gaten McKenzie's appraisal of the whole issue with the equity deal with SA Rugby? Share your thoughts in the comments.